Welcome to Sixth Station. We talk sports, tell stories, and explore history. Today, I'm narrating in English to connect with my fellow Canadian Kendoists and with the wider Canadian audience. Feel free to turn on the subtitles if you like. The history of Kendo in Canada is a microcosm of the Japanese-Canadian experience. It's a powerful story of immigration, struggle, and cultural survival. Exploring it gives us a glimpse into the resilience and how culture can endure, even in the harshest times. Let's walk that journey together through 4 defining stages of Kendo's history in Canada. From the early blossom of Kendo in Japanese-Canadian communities, to its quiet persistence during the internment camps of World War II, to the founding of the Canadian Kendo Federation and the national revival, and now to its continued growth with over 50 dojos across the country and a presence on the world stage. In the late 1800s, Japanese immigrants arrived in Canada, drawn by the opportunities in British Columbia. Manzo Nagano is the first known Japanese immigrant to Canada. In March 1877, at age 24, he arrived at New Westminster. Many Japanese immigrants settled in vibrant communities like Stevenson's fishing villages and Vancouver's Powell Street. They worked as fishermen, farmers, and loggers. These early pioneers built tightly knit neighborhoods, complete with language schools and cultural clubs. The trend of Japanese immigration grew. In 1901, there were 4,700 Japanese living in Canada, 97% of them in British Columbia. In the year 1907 alone, more than 7,000 Japanese arrived. But rising numbers fueled anti-Asian sentiment. In August 1907, the Anti-Asiatic League was formed. On September 7th of that year, anti-Asian riots swept through Vancouver, targeting Chinese and Japanese shops and homes. This left scars on Powell Street. In the aftermath, Canada and Japan reached a so-called gentleman's agreement in 1908, which restricted Japanese immigration to Canada. Only family reunifications and limited government-approved entries were allowed. As a result, only 500 Japanese immigrants arrived the following year. However, since the agreements restricted adult males but not women, many Japanese women migrated as so-called picture brides, joining their husbands and, in a way, helping to balance the gender ratio. To illustrate, between 1921 and 1931, 1,200 Japanese males entered Canada, compared with 2,100 females. Their arrival supported the natural growth of the Japanese-Canadian community and played a vital role in preserving Japanese culture. According to the 1931 census, there were 22,000 Japanese in Canada, of whom 41% were female. In contrast, the Chinese population was 27,000, with only 8% women. Also telling, of the Japanese in Canada, 39% were aged 14 or younger, including 3,400 under the age of 5, clear signs of growing families. For comparison, among Chinese Canadians, only 8% were 14 or under. You get the sense that Japanese Canadians had begun settling and growing roots in British Columbia, despite the challenges they faced. They brought traditions like Kendo to their new home. Kendo became a way to preserve cultural identity. It was practiced in community halls and gatherings. By the early 1900s, Kendo took roots in Canada with the establishment of the Yokikan Dojo by Kentaro Suzuki Sensei in Steveston in 1914. This was the first formal Kendo dojo in Canada. In 1920, Rintaro Hayashi Sensei, who had immigrated from Japan at age 12, became Steveston's head instructor at just 19 years old. Today, a street in Steveston is named after him, a tribute to his contributions during the era of Japanese-Canadian segregation and to the University of British Columbia. Kendo was thriving. By 1940, there were at least 6 dojos across British Columbia. In Vancouver, Steveston, Sunbury, Warnock, Woodfibre, and New Westminster. News clips from those days reported over 100 Kendoists competing in a major tournament in British Columbia each year. Those events were often held alongside community festivals and language schools. They were more than competitions, more like celebrations of cultural heritage. The first Canadian National Kendo Tournament in 1939 showcased the growing popularity of Kendo. News of Kendo activities became a regular feature in local Japanese Canadian newspapers. The attack on Pearl Harbor on 7th of December 1941 turned Japanese Canadian lives upside down. On 14th of January 1942, Prime Minister Mackenzie King ordered the removal of all adult males of Japanese ancestry from the coast. Just over a month later, on February 25th, he announced that all people of Japanese ancestry would be excluded from a 100-mile zone inland from the Pacific coast. Over 22,000 Japanese Canadians were forcibly removed from their homes. 60% of them were born in Canada. They were labeled enemy aliens. Most were sent to internment camps in the Slocan Valley, such as Tashmi. Families were housed in hastily converted buildings or newly built shacks. Roughly 700 men considered troublemakers were sent to Angler Prisoner of War (POW) camp in Ontario under even stricter conditions. Their homes, fishing boats, personal properties, and businesses were confiscated or sold for a fraction of their value. Unbelievably, Japanese Canadians were required to use those very funds to pay for their own confinement. Kendo practice was disrupted as community structures crumbled. Yet, even in these dark times, the spirit of Kendo endured. At Angler POW camp, internees founded the Shoko Kendo Club, led by Moto Matsushita Sensei. Around the same time, Raymond Kendo Club was founded in Raymond, Alberta, where Yoichi Akune Sensei was interned. Using makeshift Shinai, they trained in defiance. Practicing Kendo in a prison camp was probably an act of quiet resistance, a powerful symbol of cultural resilience. It kept Japanese Canadian identity alive amidst loss and uncertainty. In 1945, Japanese Canadians were given two choices: resettle east of the Rockies or repatriate to Japan. They were not permitted to return to the West Coast until 1949. Many were involuntarily deported to Japan, but others chose a new path, moving east, especially to the Greater Toronto area. This marked a major demographic shift that reshaped the Japanese Canadian community. Amid this migration, Kendo experienced a revival and spread beyond British Columbia. In the 1950s and 60s, 4 new dojos were established, 2 in Vancouver and 2 in Toronto. One of them was the Steveston Kendo Club, re-established by Yuichi Akune Sensei after returning from internment in Raymond, Alberta. In 1958, he organized the first post-war international tournament, bringing together clubs from California and Washington. The event grew into an annual tradition in Steveston, eventually attracting participants from as far as Toronto and Hawaii. The 61st Steveston Kendo Tournament was held earlier this year, and hey, I was there too. The Steveston Martial Arts Center, constructed in 1971 and home to the club, remains one of a kind in all of North America. Around the same time, in Quebec, Kiyoshi Ono Sensei, who practiced Kendo at the Angler POW camp during internment, began teaching in the 1950s and later established a dojo in the 1970s. During my research, one name kept popping up in newspaper archives: Larry Nakayama Sensei. Born in Canada, he appeared to be a central figure in the Kendo community across GTA. Nakayama Sensei founded Toka Budokan in Toronto and played a key role in popularizing Kendo beyond Japanese Canadian circles. As Japanese immigration resumed, Kendo's growth picked up the momentum again. Visiting senseis and young practitioners brought fresh energy to dojos across the country. Cultural exchange lies at the heart of modern Kendo. Canadian students travel to train in Japan, while Japanese senseis continue to teach here. Even legendary figures like Sasaburo Takano Sensei, one of the founding fathers of modern Kendo, visited Vancouver to share their teachings. Kendo also took root in university clubs. Clubs were established at the U of T in 1977, at UBC in 1978, and at UVic in 1980. Imagine the energy of those youth-led movements. The founding of a National Kendo Federation appeared to have taken a little twist in history. If you do a Google search, you'll find very little about what happened before the Canadian Kendo Federation officially began. But digging into old newspaper clippings reveals an interesting story between 1964 and 1966. In September 1964, The Canadian Kendo Association was established in Toronto with Frank Asano Sensei as president. At the opening ceremony, Larry Nakamura Sensei even read a message from the president of the All Japan Kendo Federation. A gesture of blessing? Perhaps? But then things got complicated. By January 1966, Reverend Ken Imai was appointed president of the CKA. At that same meeting, Asano Sensei's resignation was accepted. Wait, his letter of resignation was actually submitted way back in October 1964, barely a month after the CKA's founding? Something wasn't adding up. The CKA also seemed heavily Toronto-focused. And his first task in 1966 was to become an overseas member of AJKF? That meant little progress had been made over the previous 18 months. Here is where we finally got a glimpse of what actually happened. There was apparently a Cold War in the Canadian Kendo community. There were many conflicting ideas and opinions between different Kendo factions. I believe these were between East and West. What do you think? Thankfully, in February 1966, Torao Mori Hanshi stepped in to mediate. By March, the conflict was resolved, and the new Canadian Kendo Federation was born. Yuichi Akune Sensei became its first president, with Nakamura Sensei and Kobayashi Sensei elected vice presidents, symbolizing a balance between East and West. Frank Asano Sensei, who had resigned from the CKA, returned as a director of the CKF, another sign of reconciliation after the Cold War. This chapter of history isn't well documented online, which is why it's often overlooked, but the formation of the CKF was a turning point. It united dojos across the country and formalized Kendo's growth. Today, many practitioners are Canadian-born, representing a wide range of cultural backgrounds. Instructors from around the world, including Korea, Taiwan, and beyond, have brought their own perspectives, enriching the art while preserving its essence. Together, they blended Japanese tradition with a uniquely Canadian spirit of inclusivity. Canada has participated in every World Kendo Championship since its inception in 1970. And even its precursor, a goodwill event held in 1967. Over the past 40 years, Canadian teams have proudly achieved second and third place finishes on the world stage, a testament to their skill and dedication. Today, Kendo continues to thrive across the country, with over 55 dojos registered with the Canadian Kendo Federation. From the struggles of Powell Street's immigrants to the injustices of internment, Japanese Canadians endured unimaginable hardship. Yet, through Kendo, they preserved their identity, built community, and inspired future generations. This is why Kendo matters in Canada, not just as a martial art, but as a living legacy of survival, adaptation, and triumph. Thank you for joining me on Sixth Station to honor this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sixth Station for more stories that connect sports and history. See you next time.